Welcome everyone to our final community call of 2021. Good to see your faces. How are you hanging in there? Yeah, we're at that time. I wanted to make sure that we held a little bit of time for folks to trickle in because we're going to have a long conversation with several different speakers. And I wanted to make sure we were on the same page before we started with a grounding exercise. And sometimes it can be a little disconcerting when you come into a call and they're already in a grounding exercise and you're not sure what you're supposed to be doing. So I just wanted to give a moment here for folks to keep coming in. Welcome. Good to see a lot of familiar faces and some new faces too. Liz's shoes are off. I love that. Mine are too. Yeah, let's get grounded. I'm ready. All right. Feel free to come on and off video as you're comfortable. If you can stay muted unless you're speaking, often that works well. There might be times where it's good for us all to chime in, so it's not a hard and fast rule. I'm going to introduce Margarita Solis-Deal, who's going to provide our grounding exercise to start. We're here to connect on a lot of work that's been done around racial equity, justice, and healing, not just this year, but prior to that and in the years to come. And so I'm excited to let Margarita kind of help us land here together, and then we'll begin that conversation. Welcome, Margarita.
Thank you, Ben. Hi, everybody. Good to see everybody. Those of you in cars or in offices or off video, we recognize your presence. So thank you for being here. We are going to start with a nice time together just to get ready to have a conversation about healing. And so I'll let those that are involved more with this beautiful topic and project to kind of guide us in that. But anytime I think we deal with anything around healing, it's a pretty serious issue. Wounds are very present in all our lives. And so we all know the journey that healing is not an easy thing to do. And so perhaps I thought that maybe an entry point into that healing can be gratefulness, and that we sit and center ourselves in being grateful for the many things in our lives. And so that's how we're going to start. I prepared just a little visual that will guide us. Sometimes it helps. I would invite you to have something to write with you so that you can just jot down a note or two as we go through this. So Ben, if you can, and I'll guide you, Ben, there are not many slides, you know, so I just thought it would be really good. And it's really, again, I just want to express that I am grateful just to be invited to have this conversation with you and to guide you this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you find yourself. So I would like to start this to kind of just frame us a little bit, to just kind of take a deep breath in and out. I just came back from a little holiday party. And so I feel like I need some grounding. So it was a lot of fun, but it's good to kind of get centered into this. So just take a deep breath in and out, get relaxed wherever you are, except if you're driving, just stay very focused. I'd like to invite you into kind of just listening into somebody that I truly feel is a mentor in writing for me, who talks a lot about lives the life of gratefulness, or lived the life of gratefulness. And so that's Brother David Standell Rass. And he's just written some beautiful and had lived a life based on this whole approach. So why don't you just kind of listen to these words? You think this is just another day in your life. It's not just another day. It's the one day that is given to you today. It's the only gift that you have right now. And the only appropriate response is gratefulness. Now I'm going to invite you to think about what you are grateful for in this present moment. So I have a few questions on this next slide that will guide us into just kind of quick answers for you. Although for some it may not be so quick to think, well, what is that one thing? So I'm going to read these questions to you, or these invitations to fill in the blank, and give you some time to write your thoughts on it. So I'm grateful for one thing I hear. And I'll just go read right through them. I'm grateful for one thing I see. I'm grateful for one thing I smell. I'm grateful for one thing I touch or feel. I'm grateful for one, that's a typo, I'm sorry. I'm grateful for one thing I taste. That's just a really big invitation. I had, and many of you probably also had, COVID. And after a year, I still don't have my taste back. So that's a real interesting question these days. I'm grateful for one thing I taste. I'm grateful for this one heart thing in my life, and how you define that is up to you. So take some time to put some notes down for each one of those. Maybe a couple minutes and we'll move on. Give you another maybe 15 seconds or so, and we'll move on to the next invitation. I'm learning from Justine how to give time instructions. She's the master. Now I invite you to consider these other areas that you're grateful for. So this time I'd like you to kind of just lean into one. I'm grateful for this one challenging experience in my life. I'm grateful for this one mentor in my life. I'm grateful for this one lesson I learned in my life. I ask you to share these things, by the way. So just take some time to reflect on one of these and then now, the secret, I think, in gratefulness is, as many of us know, is not to keep it. I think sometimes when we're very grateful, we can't help but share it. It's just the natural response when you're grateful, is to share what you're grateful for. And if you think about it, or when I think about it, when I was a little girl, swimming in the pool with my best friend, who was my sister, I would always, when I was just full of joy doing all these fun tricks on the shallow end in the pool, I would say, Selena, watch me, watch me, watch me, or because I was so grateful that I could do something, and I was grateful enough to be able to share it with her. That is a real simple example, but we all have those examples, Oh, I would say to my husband, taste this great dinner I made, because I was so grateful I made dinner. Well, now without my taste, I don't do that as much, but before I had my taste, I did. And so it is certainly when you're grateful, you share it. It's just a natural response. It's not forced, it's natural. So this is what I'd like you to do. If you can do the next invitation, Ben, for the next slide. If I could give all this gratefulness that you just thought about to someone, what would it sound like, look like, smell like, feel like, taste like? And I want you to put that in the chat. Just write something extraordinary and just put it in the chat, because I like to see or we all would like to feel that sense of gratefulness that you have to share. So whenever you're ready, just chat away. I'm just going to read a few of these, and then we're not going to read them all, but I'm just going to read a few of them because they just kind of, wow, they're just beautiful. Rich and garlicky like Ethiopian lentil bowl. I love that. Really good chocolate. It would look like the brightest light surrounding us all. Bubbling over like a brook, sing-songing carefree. Beautiful. A letter born of considerable time in prayer and reflection. My gratitude looks like sitting next to a forest stream, sparklers, dancing, and, oh, say that, Justine? Prosecco? What is Prosecco?
Champagne, like bubbly stuff.
Like what?
Champagne.
Oh. The light on trees, warmth of sun on skin, scent of evergreens. It would sound like the wind blowing through the trees in late fall. Bread pudding with caramel sauce, a squeeze and a smile. So I would take some time to look through these chats and read through them. And so as we move into talking about this beautiful initiative about supporting the world through healing, through some really horrendous experiences that our country has had, that our African American community has had, that we are entering in a time of centering ourselves and a point of gratefulness for being at this point. And so as we do that, I like to just close with this last slide, Ben. Everything is a gift. The degree to which we are awake to this truth is a measure of our gratefulness, and gratefulness is a measure of our aliveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. Quite grounded. Appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who put notes in the chat too. Those really touched me. I have some space here for announcements before we start with looking back at some historical context of programming. And so I just want to reiterate a couple things I mentioned at the very beginning, which are that this is our last community call of the year, and our next one will be the second Tuesday in January. I have a newsletter that's ready to go out. So there are a lot of items in the newsletter that I could share with you, but you'll be getting it in your inbox within the next couple hours. So I might leave some of those announcements till later and move on to talking about the work that we've done and the work we're about to do. And I'm going to hand it over to Justine to do that.
Thanks, Ben. It is so good to see everyone, or at least the names pop up if your video's not on. What a joyous time as we, as staff, Ben and I wrap up in some ways 2021, and we've just been through so much. And it's a wild time to think we're talking about 2022 next month. And this is just a perfect way to close out our community calls of the year. With some grounding, as Margarita did, in who we are and also what we mean when we talk about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And as we were forming this, this was truly a collaborative process in the making for this call, even though you'll hear from Victoria most of the time. She invited many people in to have these conversations and to weave together the threads. So I'm going to pass it to Rako and Jenyng soon, but wanted to give you a little overarching understanding of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, so I'll just call it JEDI from now on, of the work that the Retreat Center collaboration has done from its formation. I think we saw, maybe even in our own organizations, last year was a point for many of us to not be able to turn away from justice work anymore. For many of us, that had been something we couldn't avoid because of our identities or where we were in the world, but still there was a grappling with privilege. For the Retreat Center collaboration, we knew in its formation years ago that that was vital to the work of retreat centers, not only surviving, but thriving. For our own personal work of unlearning white supremacy and other oppressions, and then also collectively, how do we hold space for healing and hold space for communities as we expand the we? So I was going to talk about this green paper we had, a lot of words about understanding our interconnectedness and our intersecting identities. But I think I'll just invite Rako to talk about one of our first threads, one of our foundational programs, to give voice to our action, right? We're living into this work. And then after Rako's done, I will invite Jenyng, if she's still with us, to talk about our additional or second step in that work. So Rako, so good to see you and happy you're with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Justine and Ben, and hello, everybody. And Margarita, thank you so much for that gratitude practice. Really appreciated that. I think in the sort of fall or late summer of 2019, some of the steering committee of the Retreat Center collaboration, we met at Gilchrist, and we were, we were engaged in a conversation that was ongoing around equity, transformation, regeneration, the future retreat centers. And from this particular retreat in the fall of 2019, there's a lot of energy around the relationship between deep transformation and equity. And what did that mean? How do we come to understand what type of learning opportunities, trainings, workshops might be good for retreat centers in general, but also those of us who are acting in leadership or in relationship with retreat centers in terms of executive directors, board members. So basically the question is, how do we begin to embody that which we want to enact in terms of transformative change with regards to equity? And I think because of the nature of retreat centers that really centers a lot of the inner work and has been looking at the relationship between the inner and the outer. Some of the questions are what constitutes transformation came up. How do we understand development in terms of what capacities need to come online with regards to being more equitable, being more inclusive, having the language or the language that resonates or the language that is appropriate to unlearn and to build and to grow. And the big question, I'm on the call, but
oh, sorry,
it's okay. Good. I'm glad you had a revelation. And so how do we adapt to the moments where things shift and work with emergence, including revelations of 14-year-old young men, which I'm glad to hear. Oh, man, that was great. Well timed, son. Yeah, how do we begin? And I guess the one of the big questions is, how do we do this in community? And how do we do it experientially, knowing that types of transformation or deep transformation isn't something that we do intellectually or just politically in our mind. And that part of the challenge of some of our equity movements and social justice movements is so much of it is centered on cognition, centered only on what we know, and shifts in perspective and not necessarily embodiment. And then how do we do that type of experiential work, that deep experiential work, that integrative work in the context of community, as a community of practice? So that was a part, the ongoing conversation that really kind of came to the head in fall of 2019. And from that, we decided as a steering committee to create a pilot program, which we called Roots to Reach, which was at the time a 9-month program that we started in February 2020. right before, or right as the pandemic hit, and it was going to be a hybrid offering of I think 3 or 4 in-person retreats with 30 retreat center directors and board members, stakeholders from different parts of the region, that we would get together and be in community and practice together around this idea of deep transformation, resilience, and collective emergence. At the time, the way that we offered it was that it didn't at the time center just equity. It centered transformation and the evolution of our worldviews. It centered getting into a cadence and a rhythm of transformative practice. It centered understanding our parts, our shadows, these types of things, so that we can grow in our capacities to take the perspective of others, and then begin to do the deeper work around equity in ways that make sense for us in terms of our worldview and our conditions. So basically, we met once in person in late February 2020. And that was a really an amazing time. We spent three or 4 days at Commonweal in Bolinas, where we had, again, about 30 of us came together. And the way that I and Michael Brabant was the co-facilitator, co-designer. We had a team of folks, but Michael Brabant and I co-facilitated it. We had basically kind of 3 interconnected modules or approaches that built upon each other. And the first one was transformative practices, experienced transformative practices, what we called evolutionary or sacred cross training. And this is really working on how do we really in touch with body, mind, spirit, shadow on a continual basis? How do we develop in these capacities? How are we coming into the body? How we begin to recognize our own gifts and limitations? How do we develop those kind of reflexive meta-awareness, cognition in an embodied and collective way? And if that wasn't enough to practice together, we also offered the idea of worldview literacy as kind of the second module. And it's like, how do we begin to recognize that we have a distinct worldview, and that there are other worldviews that exist, and these worldviews, as Rick Tarnas said, worldviews create worlds. And so if our idea is, or our hope is, to create another world that is more inclusive and not extractive and non-harmful and non-racist, what worldview do we need to inhabit, and how do we begin to come into awareness in our bodies around that? And then the third module or component of it was how do we begin to take this embodiment on these worldview explorations, and to begin to design interventions or experiments within our own retreat centers and communities. So that was the intent. Now, when COVID came and hit, and we had to pivot pretty hard, and so we did a lot of shifting. But the idea was, how do we begin to inhabit a more inclusive, more embodied collective worldview for resilience, transformation, and by extension, equity. So I think I'll stop there, because I believe there might be some questions, or somebody might speak to what we did a little bit. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Rako. And I loved the revelation that happened. So it is an invitation for anyone to put in the chat who participated in Roots to Reach to speak to that, a way of knowing or learning that helped grow who you are or your community. And I would pass it over to Jenyng as well.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am located outside of Milpitas, charging my car at a Walmart. And so I'm so glad to be here with you all, and happy that I can be stationary. I was asked to sort of share about JEDI circles, but mostly the question of why justice, why equity, why now? And I have to go back, and I love that, Rako, you sort of laid out a summary of Roots to Reach, because that was sort of a starting point, or the predecessor, and then to see the connection of R to R and then into JEDI circles. I think it was a confluence of things that intersected together at the right time. One was my own personal experience of what was happening in 2020 with George Floyd, with Amu Audrey, with Breonna Taylor, and also, you know, having biracial children, my own experience. And then that timing, if I think about it, around January was, there is no right time. We need to do it. The reason for justice and equity is because we live in an unjust and unequitable world. And because of that, people are suffering in various different ways. So how can we in our own sandbox, in our own room, in our own spaces, shift that? And we don't need big, huge, you know, movements or revolutions. If those come, great. But right now, right at this time, we individually can. And thus was born the JEDI Circle for RCC. And I also want to note, at that time, RCC, committed to justice and equity, diversity, inclusion work, was seeing what's next. And somehow those two got brought together, and through wonderful partnership with Justine, and then having an RCC committee of Arlene and Kirsten and Michael, some of you may know them, really happened into modeling what partnership and creative innovation, how to be practical and emergent at the same time, unfolded. So I think people are important. And as a friend of mine, I love how he starts a meeting: the right number and the right people always show up. And so I think the folks that did the circles, it was definitely a deep experience. I'll just speak for myself. RCC did have a session on the JEDI circles. In it, we dived and unpacked and extrapolated and shared tools. So I'm not going to do that in this space. Please go look at that recording. But the final thing I'll say is it's ongoing work. The reason I'm in transit is this weekend I went down to another friend of mine who, it was the last of a 4-part dinner series to bring her local community together to just talk about race over food. I wanted to attend this last one to see how they did it, because it's sort of, I live in Northern California, and thinking here in Sonoma County, where it's replenished with wealth and food and wine, and yet we have migrant workers and undocumented workers. How do we bring those two together? And food is a great way. Sharing a meal is a great way. So thus I went down. And so there's all these little pockets of people doing these things to just talk about race, because it's just a thing. And by not talking about it, by not acknowledging the injustice, by not acknowledging the inequity, we give it power, we give it agency. And so how do we, in our spiritual practices, begin to sort of look at other contours and be more creative in how we see it? So in any case, was so privileged and honored to be able to hold that program with RCC folks and a collective group, and so glad now to sort of see this thread of R to R to that, and now to RHI.
Thank you, Jenyng. That's a great overview. Helpful to hear the context, even for me, from Roots to Reach and what was trying to be accomplished and the intentions there, through to JEDI Circles, which held a different kind of space for a broader community and reflected back into that community call. And I saw Justine talked about perhaps posting that in the blog over to the Mighty Network, so we can catch that again. I think also it's interesting to see how our steering committee members have tried these various incarnations of approaching this work, and how you, Jenyng, were actually involved also in some of the grant writing or the concept development for connecting with the Racial Healing Initiative, which Victoria Santos, who's on the call here, is the director of. So you actually helped kind of build a bridge there in this community as we moved through trying out different ways of fitting together and having a conversation. I want to introduce Victoria to speak on the Racial Healing Initiative, which launched in September. So she'll share some of what we're working on with that team.
Muchas gracias, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Bienvenido. Welcome, everyone. Es un placer estar aquí con ustedes. a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm excited for what's to come and what has come before this moment. Rako and Jenyng have really laid a good foundation for us. And for that, I'm really grateful. Thank you, Margarita, for grounding us with gratitude. It's such a wonderful practice to just open the heart and to know that we are actually living in abundance, even in the midst of the chaos. So it's just in that, both of them are true. The Racial Healing Initiative and the way that I got involved was that early on, there was a conversation to continue to deepen in the work of racial healing and equity, injustice, and transformation with the RCC. And there was a grant that was put together, and that grant needed some more support. And then I was asked to look at it and to contribute to it. And as I started getting involved in doing this, I just started getting energized by the possibility of doing this work across all of these centers. I have been involved in the practice of racial healing and practices, conflict resolution, mediation, diversity and inclusion work, whatever. There's been so much different names that have come throughout the times for the past 30 years that I could really see how this can be a template that can permeate into the fabric of retreat centers to then be able to really hold what's emerging as a society. And that is, for me, from what I perceive, is that we are actually going through a major evolutionary moment right now, and that to be in a space of retreat where the land is supported and cultivated, where the people are holding intentionality, can really be a tremendous space for healing, not just in terms of some of the healing practices that are currently happening, but for healing among different groups to come together and release that which maintains us in the illusion of separation. So that's really why I signed up for this. And then looking at some of the work that Kellogg has been doing for a number of years in terms of promoting and supporting racial healing, it felt like a no-brainer to do. It felt like the next piece of the work for me. So I just want to give you a definition of racial healing that's being used by Kellogg. And then I want to talk a little bit more in just the nuts and bolts of the Racial Healing Initiative. And then I want to share some videos and some music with you. Okay. So racial healing is a process that restores individuals and communities to wholeness, repairs the damage caused by racism and transforms societal structure into one that affirms the inherent value of all people. It makes it possible to acknowledge and speak the truth about past wrongs created by individual and systemic racism, and to address present-day consequences for people, community, and institutions. Now, interestingly enough, what I just read gets very controversial in some circles. We're talking about speaking the truth about past wrongs created by individual and systemic racism, to address present-day consequences for people, community, and institutions. And this is not just for some people, this is for all people. And it's not just acknowledging the impact of racism on some people, it's acknowledging the impact of racism on all people. On that note, I am going to play you a little musical interlude, because we've been talking a lot. So I want you to really listen to this song and do whatever you want to do. If you want to go off camera for a moment, if you want to move, if you want to rub your fingers, rub your face, just try to tap into the vibe of the song, okay? here we go. Here we go. I'm not going to share the visual, just the song, unless you want me to share the visual. Ben, should I share the visual?
If it's the video I'm thinking of, I do like the visual.
Okay, let's see. I got to share here. Okay. I don't know if it's the video you're thinking of, but it's a really wonderful video. And it's, here we go. Okay. Let's come back. I know you'll want to continue to watch that. I wanted to share that with you, that song, because it talks about my sisters and my brothers, right? And all my favorite colors, not just one, not just two, all of it, right? And that's really what the opportunity here is for us to come back into a deeper relationship with each other. Thank you, Jolanda. Yeah, and Lauren. Yeah, it's like, that is the opportunity. That is the promise. So the Racial Healing Initiative is seeking to bring a group of facilitators. These are people who have been doing this work for many, many years, who have committed themselves to being bridge builders. And we're coming together to then learn from each other, cultivate our own relationship with each other, and then support the retreat centers in helping to look at themselves, see what has been going on, what has been done in your centers. And then from there, design a roadmap to help you to move along in this journey of racial healing at your retreat centers. We're going to be providing workshops on site of the retreat center to a group of stakeholders that are selected by the people there at the retreat centers. And then two of our facilitators, with my support, Ben's support, will come in and do a training and a workshop. After that, there's going to be continued follow-up and technical assistance and support to continue to permeate this into the fabric of your center to the extent that you want to, capable of, etc. We're also going to be providing workshops online in the same way that we're kind of gathering here. And there's going to be other kinds of gatherings and support that's going to be happening throughout the year. So that's the structure for what the Racial Healing Initiative is going to follow. In addition to that, there's going to be opportunities for you to hop up into other opportunities, not only the small groups workshops, but there might be other opportunities that Ben and I will be cooking up, and that these other facilitators, so we just already hired, and they're amazing, will be cooking up for you to just continue to stay in the conversation, learn our skills, and then also not only learn in terms of like us teaching or anything like that, but also like really you taking the time to really go internally and look at how do you, and this relates back to the question that that we posed, right, is to really take the time to look at how can you increase your own capacity? How can you increase your own capacity? And also assess what is your current capacity? And then using some of the tools and techniques to expand on that. So to that end, I'm going to show you just another short video by the director from the Kellogg Foundation, where she speaks a little bit more about their commitment around the Racial Healing Initiative. And then we're going to have you, I'm going to do an exercise so that you can really get a little practice here. Okay, so let's see. Let me go back to sharing. Let me just get the video here going.
Can you tick that little box on the bottom about
Okay.
video?
And then I'm gonna share the screen.
optimize video, right, Ben?
Did you say something, Ben?
Yeah,
I heard away.
Can you tick that little box that says optimize for video sharing? It's at the bottom of the share screen menu.
Did I what?
When you click share screen, then at the bottom of that, there's a little checkbox for video. Just make sure you tick that. And then it'll like show the video a little more smoothly. And we'll hear the audio too. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sharing, and then I don't see it. There was this multiple but advanced sharing option. Would that be under advanced sharing options?
I don't think so. I think it's just at the bottom of that bubble. It's like a little square. Do you see it? It's not essential. It's fine.
Okay. I'm like, okay, let's work on that next time.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Here we go. So this is in this site. I'm gonna drop it in the chat so you can actually go. They have tons of resources here, so you don't even have to wait for us. You could just go here and watch some of these videos and use the toolkits that they have and start having some of these conversations. Here we go. You ready?
Great ancestors you have bred.
Sorry, this is not the one. Although this one is worth definitely seeing. Just give me 1 minute. Am I still video sharing? No. Okay. This is when you wish you had like 3 different screens. You know, it's okay. It's not showing up for some reason, but it's okay. Let's just go back to, let's just do the exercise, and then when we come back from the exercise, I'll play it for you. So the exercise I would like you to lead, I'm going to share the screen again, and I'm going to share this one. And here we go. So here's a list of 5 items to maximize learning for social justice in a social justice context, right? Can you all read this? Okay. So the first one is to strive for intellectual humility. Recognize the difference between opinion and informed knowledge. Let go of personal anecdotal evidence and look to a broader social patterns. Notice your own defensive reaction and attempt to use those reactions as entry points for gaining deeper self-knowledge. And 5, recognize how your own positionality, your race, your class, your gender, sexuality, ability, status, informs your perspective and reaction to your instructor and individuals whose work you study. So take a look at those 5. And here is the question. And then we're going to break you up into small groups. When was one time when you did not do one of these 5? And when is a time when one of these 5 might have made a positive difference in a situation? So we're working on this essential questions. How can we increase our capacity to see more clearly the truth of where the other person is and where I am? Going back here. And here's the question. When was one time when I did not do one of these? And what were the implications? Any questions before we move on? Okay. Ben, let's go ahead and break them up into small groups.
Groups of 3. How many minutes do we want to spend?
I still have another half hour, right?
That's right.
How about just 10 minutes?
Sure. All right, folks. Double check my rooms. Move. I'm going to just move a couple of people here. 1 second. Okay, now we're ready. Here we go.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
This quote comes from Adrienne Marie Brown, and it goes like this. I have a vision of social justice movement as sanctuary, not a tiny perfectionist utopia behind, hold on, I gotta make this a little bigger. Not a tiny perfectionist utopia behind miles of barbed wire and walls and fences and tests and judgments and righteousness, but a vast sanctuary where our experiences as humans who have experienced and caused harm are met with centered, grounded invitation to grow. I have a vision of social justice movement as sanctuary, not a tiny perfectionist utopia behind miles of barbed wires and walls and fences and tests and judgments and righteousness, but a vast sanctuary where our experiences as humans who have experienced and caused harm are met with centered, grounded invitations to grow. Adrienne Marie Brown, I love her work. So here is the prompt for you. What happens in my body when I think about finding common purpose with other people? What would it mean to focus on what is being done right or well by those who share my commitment for justice? When have I experienced what Brown calls sanctuary?
Would you repeat the second one? I don't think it's a visual, is it?
No, it's a question. The question
The second
is,
one.
yeah, what would it mean to focus on what is being done right or well by those who share my commitment for justice? And you can take this, you can write these down and just reflect on them, because this is really the invitation. The invitation is, and this is going to be the invitation to reach all retreat centers. It's not for us to create spaces that are utopias where people can just come and run away from the world. Right? It's creating spaces where we can really create a sanctuary where all of our brokenness can come in and all of our wholeness can come in. Where we can look at, what is right, what has been working for those who are committed to racial healing through just social justice. And how can I continue to bring my voice, my own brokenness to this without having to leave, right? So that's really is the invitation. Anyone want to reflect on anything I just shared? Yes, Kathy? Is that Katie or Kat? Was that you that you went like this? What was that?
Are you
You're
talking
muted.
about me? Sorry. No, I was
Yeah.
I was just writing. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. What do you want to say?
No, I was just taking notes and thinking. I don't have anything. Sorry.
Do we know each other? Oh, yes, Katie. Of course, Katie. Come on. What are you thinking? What's in the brain? Come on.
I'm thinking about how you talk about the brokenness and the wholeness. And I was picturing, this isn't going to be a formed thought because I wasn't really ready to say anything, but I'm thinking about how, the challenge is to not be a host of a place where people can run away to a peaceful sanctuary. They need to bring a bit of the world, the real grit of the world with them, because the grit of the world is within them. And what they're doing there is opening up their inner life, which has some of that grit. And so, and grit and grime. And I'm thinking about how we as leaders, whether we're people that are bringing them a delicious meal at a retreat, or whether we are facilitating something transformational for an afternoon, to making their bed space comfortable for them. When we're honest with ourselves and vulnerable about our brokenness, and when we bring that to the forefront, and acknowledge who we are, maybe as a, this is how I show up from a place of entitlement, but this is also how I show up from a place of fragility or a place of brokenness. And how can we be vulnerable when we're working with people? Sorry, I'm not fully forming this, but
No, you're right there. I'm right there. I think we're all right there with you. We're right. What you're saying is really important, and it's really, we need to hear this. And this is why you're speaking, my dear.
Thank you. I don't have the answer. It's just a question. It's an eternal, there are ways, but I don't.
Yeah. That's why we need community, because none of us have the answers by ourselves. And as you were speaking, I was sensing into the grief, just the grief of, we have been told, we have created a society in some spaces that is about like separating, and you go over there, you don't do this and you don't do that, and you don't measure up, you don't do this, you do this, like all the ways that we kind of continue to like put ourselves out of our own heart and out of each other's hearts. And the time is so urgent that we have to figure this out together. We have to be able to figure this out together. And part of that is being able to bring the grit, and be able to rub against each other, saying, okay, we're going to work through this rupture. We're going to work through this. We're going to commit to each other. It might be like I might need a little space, but I'm going to come back, so that we can do this work together and heal this wound. So that's what I was hearing in what you're saying, Katie. And so thank you so much for bringing it into the circle. So my friends, I figured out what it is about Native people that need a lot of time when you come together and they just spend a lot of time talking is because they have a lot to share with each other. And we also have a lot to share with each other. So let's continue this journey. And please, thank you so much for being part of the RCC. I am gonna, I know, Ben, you want to maybe say some things before you close out, but why don't you say it? And then I want to end with a little video. If you want to stick around and watch it, you can watch it, and then you can just peel off. Okay. And just to say, those reflection question also came from Leticia. And at some point, I want to ask Leticia to join, do something for the RCC because she is phenomenal, phenomenal. Sally, I see you. I love you. Let's catch up soon, okay? Ben, whatever statements you want to say, and then I want to share the video.
So just gratitude to Victoria for this session, and to Jenyng and Rako and Margarita and Justine, who all helped share and carry this story. We're doing this collaboratively. We're doing this together. I want to let you know that this is our last community call. Our next one will be January 11th next year. I want you to have a restful holiday if you get one, and to be able to come back to this community to do some more work together and to share in this collaborative process together as a community next year. I'm looking forward to it with you.
Thank you. All right, here we go. Here's the video for you. It's a gift. A friend of mine. Here we go. Let's see. This, I think this is the one. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Can you hear?
May this body be a bridge for the healing of this land. May the river flow through us, cleansing greed from our hands. May this body be a bridge for the healing of this land. May the rivers flow through us, cleansing greed from our to this land. May this body be a bridge from the water for the healing of this. May the rivers flow through great mother, cleansing to bring peace to this land. We are born from the water. We are made from the land. Teach us, oh great mother. To bring peace to this land. May this body be a bridge for the healing of this land. May the river flow through us, cleansing greed from our hands.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
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 Bye.